courtroom didn't feel like a place where justice lived that morning. It felt more like a room that had forgotten how to breathe. The kind of stillness that made every sound stand out. An old wall clock ticking too loud, the faint rustle of legal papers, the buzz of fluorescent lights. Even the sunlight filtering through the tall windows looked heavy, catching dust mid-air like trapped thoughts. All eyes were drawn to the smallest figure in the room. Her name was Lily. She was 9 years old, barely tall enough to peek over the witness stand. Her legs swung softly in the air, too short to reach the polished wooden footrest below. In her lap, held tight in both hands, was an old cloth-bound storybook, its faded pink cover frayed at the corners, the spine soft from use, a safety object, a memory she could still hold on to when words had long since disappeared. She wasn't dressed for court. She wore a soft lavender dress with tiny embroidered stars. The kind of dress you wear not because it's fancy, but because it makes you feel brave, or at least like you might be. But this wasn't a school recital. This wasn't even a bad dream. This was family court in a quiet town tucked between the mountains of Vermont, and Lily was the only child in a sea of adults. On one side of the room sat her mother, shoulders slumped forward, dressed in a plain cardigan and navy scrubs. A tissue crumpled in her hand, clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her face looked tired, worn, but fierce in a way only mothers could be when the stakes were this high. She worked nights as a nurse at the county hospital. She'd saved strangers her entire life. Now she was trying to save her daughter. On the other side sat her father, a tall man in a stiff button-down shirt, jaw clenched, fists closed on the table in front of him. His gaze was hollow, unfocused, trembling in ways that didn't show up on paper. The tension in the room was invisible but alive, like static before a storm. But Lily wasn't looking at either of them. Her eyes were locked on something just beyond the wooden partition, on a dog, a large German shepherd, sitting completely still near the back of the courtroom. He wore a deep forest green vest embroidered with white block letters. Service dog, do not pet. His name was Max. He didn't fidget, didn't whimper, didn't even blink much. But something about him, his presence, radiated alertness, like he was waiting for something the rest of the room hadn't yet realized was coming. There was no leash in Lily's hands, no touch, no sound, just a long, still connection between two beings who understood each other in a language only they could hear. What happened next, no one in the courtroom expected, but every person there would remember it for the rest of their lives. The silence hadn't arrived all at once. It came in pieces. It began with footsteps, heavy ones, pacing the length of a narrow hallway late one winter night. The house creaked under their weight, like it was holding its breath too. Dishes clinked in the sink, something fell, a door slammed. None of it startled Lily anymore. It was routine, the kind of tension a child doesn't learn but absorbs, the way skin feels temperature or ears catch thunder from miles away. Her father had been restless for days. Job interviews hadn't panned out. Bills were piling up. Her mother had been picking up double shifts at the hospital. And Lily had learned how to disappear. That night the air was colder than usual. The windows fogged from the contrast between the frost outside and the furnace heat barely trickling in. Lily had crawled into her blanket fort with her storybook. It was the same one she held in court weeks later, the one with the worn pink cover and bent spine. She wasn't reading, just tracing the outlines of the illustrations, page after page, as if trying to memorize a world that was safer, warmer, not hers. Downstairs, voices had started to rise. Her parents, one trying to explain, the other trying not to listen. The argument wasn't new, but that night something cracked wider. She heard the footsteps again, faster this time, harder. Then her father's voice, sharp and loud. Not words, just volume. Her mother shouting back. Then silence. the kind that made your stomach twist before anything even happened. Lily did what she'd been taught, by instinct, not by anyone's words. She got small. She crawled into the corner of her room. She held her breath, but he found her. The door flung open so hard it hit the wall behind it. He was red-faced, shaking, mouth moving too fast. She couldn't make out the words, just fury. Just the sound of rage trying to be something else and failing. She tried to move past him, but he blocked her path. She turned away, but he grabbed her arm. Too tightly, one wrong glance, one wrong flinch, and the world exploded. She remembered the feeling of the floor beneath her, the spinning blur of ceiling lights, the way her own breath caught in her throat like it didn't know if it should scream or disappear. She didn't scream. She never did. Afterwards, she wasn't taken to the hospital. There were no police reports, no emergency calls. Her mother whispered apologies through her tears, tried to explain that things would be okay. But Lily knew better. Even at 9, she knew some things couldn't be unsaid. Some things, once they happen, change how the walls feel around you. Change how you understand the meaning of home. Over the next few days, Lily said less and less. Not out of rebellion, but because words had stopped feeling safe. She didn't ask for bedtime stories anymore, didn't hum while brushing her teeth, didn't call for her mom when she woke from nightmares. She simply folded inward. A therapist came, then another. They gave her crayons, sand trays, stuffed animals. They asked her to point, to act things out with dolls. Lily stayed quiet. She wasn't being difficult, she was being careful, because she'd learned what happened when words came out wrong. She'd learned that silence, while lonely, was safer than being heard by the wrong ears. Her mother tried everything. Books, puzzles, even lullabies she hadn't sung since Lily was a toddler. But her daughter's eyes stayed down, her shoulders rounded. She flinched at loud noises and never initiated touch. It wasn't that Lily had forgotten how to speak, it was that she didn't trust language anymore. Words had let her down. Words had brought pain, and so the silence settled in, not just around her, but within her. Healing didn't arrive in the form of breakthrough moments or dramatic tears. For Lily, it arrived quietly, on 4 steady paws, on a rainy afternoon when no one expected anything to change. The therapy center smelled faintly of cinnamon and something sterile. Outside, the windows were streaked with thin trails of rain, distorting the shapes of passing cars and early spring trees just beginning to bud. Lily sat curled in the corner of the room, her back against the wall, fingers tangled in the sleeve of her cardigan. A coloring book lay open beside her, but the pages remained untouched as they had for weeks. She didn't look up when the door opened. Her therapist, Dr. Harper, had said someone new would be joining their session. Not a person, not really, a presence. And then he appeared. He entered without fanfare, without leash or handler, just steady steps and a calm gaze. Max, a German shepherd with thick sable fur and eyes that seemed far too knowing for a dog. He moved with purpose but without urgency, pausing near the bookshelf where a mat had been laid out for him. He didn't bark. He didn't approach. He simply laid down, tucked his paws beneath him, and watched, without watching, like he'd been in this room 100 times before. Lily noticed him. She didn't react, but her eyes followed him. Not out of curiosity, but something more primal, recognition. Like 2 beings that had seen the same kind of darkness were now sitting in its quiet aftermath, together. The room was still. No one asked Lily to speak. No one coaxed or prompted. Max remained where he was, breathing slow and steady. The rise and fall of his chest almost synchronized with hers. And somehow in that shared rhythm, something opened. Not all at once, but just enough to shift the air. Days passed, then weeks, and every time Lily entered the therapy room, Max was already there, waiting, always in the same corner, always with the same quiet patience. Lily began sitting a little closer, first across the room, then on the rug beside the table. Eventually just near enough that she could hear the soft sound of his breathing, feel the warmth radiating off his fur. She never touched him, but she didn't move away either. It was during one of these sessions that a crayon rolled off the edge of the table and landed near Max's front paw. Lily hesitated, then reached. Her fingers grazed the fur along his leg, and he didn't flinch. Neither did she. It wasn't a planned moment, or even a meaningful one, not to anyone watching. But to Lily, it was the first contact she had made with another living being in months that didn't feel like a risk. From there, Dr. Harper introduced hand signals, tiny, deliberate gestures they could use as a shared language between Lily and Max. A tap on the chest meant, "I'm okay." A small circle drawn in the air with her pinky meant, "Tell them." 2 taps meant, "Say the truth." They practiced quietly, sometimes while coloring, sometimes while just sitting. Max, who had been specially trained for trauma work, responded to every signal with calm understanding. He didn't need treats or praise. Lily never smiled, but her body began to remember something it had long forgotten: trust. There were days when she wouldn't look at Dr. Harper at all, but she would glance at Max. When asked a question, she might raise a hand, touch her chest, or shift slightly toward the dog. These were her words now, not spoken, but seen. Her language had changed, but she was speaking again. To Lily, Max was more than a service dog. He was a steady force in a world that had become unpredictable. He never raised his voice, never asked her to be brave. He simply existed, unmoving, unwavering. And in that presence, Lily found something no one had been able to give her: space. The kind that didn't ask for performance or healing on demand, just being. Eventually, she began to lean on him, first physically, then emotionally, sitting beside him, letting her shoulder brush against his fur. Sometimes she'd place her hand gently on his back and leave it there for entire sessions. And Max, without being told, would lean back, not forcefully, not protectively, just enough to say, "I'm here. You don't have to carry this alone." No words had been exchanged, but something between them had begun to bloom, quiet, honest, and strong enough to hold the weight of everything Lily had been too afraid to say. The second time Lily sat in that courtroom, it didn't feel any less daunting. The polished wood still gleamed too brightly. The chairs still creaked under the weight of people pretending not to be afraid. And the air still held that strange, breathless quality, as if the room itself was waiting for something it didn't know how to handle. But this time, she wasn't alone. Max sat behind the wooden barrier, exactly where he had during the preliminary hearing weeks earlier. Upright, alert, not moving. His vest still read, "Service dog, do not pet," but it may as well have said, "Protector of silent things." He wasn't there to testify. He was there to witness. Lily's fingers clutched the fabric of her storybook, the same one she had held every time her words failed. Her feet still didn't reach the ground, but she sat straighter now, shoulders not quite squared, but no longer folded inward. The judge, Eleanor Brooks, adjusted her glasses and looked at Lily, not with the dispassionate stare of a legal authority, but with the kind of focus that came from truly seeing. She had read the files, seen the therapist's notes, approved Max's presence in court after reading a report that was more plea than clinical assessment. Still, she hadn't expected this. Lily unmoving, Max waiting, the silence between them not empty, but full. Judge Brooks leaned forward, her voice gentler than anyone had heard it that morning. "Lily," she said, "I need to ask you something. You don't have to answer with words if you're not ready. You can use the signals you've practiced. Or you can look at Max. We'll understand." The room was still. No one whispered. No one shifted in their seat. Even the court clerk paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard, as if a keystroke might disturb whatever fragile moment was forming. Lily didn't move at first. Her eyes stayed down, her hand resting on her book. Max remained behind the barrier, unmoving. The pause stretched longer than expected, but no one spoke. Then slowly, Lily's right hand lifted, only slightly. She drew a small circle in the air with her pinky, so soft it was nearly invisible. To anyone else, it might have looked like nothing. But Max saw. Without hesitation, he rose in one fluid motion and walked calmly to the side gate beside the witness stand. The bailiff instinctively reached forward, but Judge Brooks raised a hand. "Let him!" Max passed through the gate and walked to Lily's side, his steps even and confident. He sat beside her, facing the courtroom. Still, steady. Then Lily tapped her chest. Once, twice. Max barked, just one bark. Short, clear, and unmistakably intentional. A ripple went through the room. Not chaos, not confusion, just a collective shift in understanding. As if something previously locked away had just been cracked open. Lily's mother covered her mouth with both hands. The opposing attorneys leaned toward each other, whispering. The clerk blinked rapidly. Even Judge Brooks straightened in her chair. "What does that mean?" the judge asked, not taking her eyes off Lily. From the back of the room, Dr. Harper, Lily's therapist, stood. Her voice wavered slightly. "It's part of a communication sequence," she said. "Lily and Max have practiced it for months. It's how she tells the truth when she's too afraid to say it out loud." The room exhaled, almost imperceptibly. Then Dr. Harper stepped forward, holding a small envelope, cream-colored, slightly bent at the corners. Her hand trembled. "She gave me this yesterday," she said. "She told me to only give it to the judge if Max barked." Judge Brooks reached for the envelope. Her fingers were steady, but her face betrayed a flicker of uncertainty, even reverence. She opened it slowly, carefully, as if it might fall apart in her hands. Inside was a crayon drawing, done by a child's hand, but startling in its clarity. It showed a little girl crouched in the corner of a room, arms wrapped tightly around her head. Looming over her was a man, red-faced, distorted, mouth wide in a silent scream, fists clenched. In the corner of the scene, standing between the girl and the man, was Max, his body low and defensive, teeth bared, eyes sharp. He wasn't attacking. He was protecting. Judge Brooks stared at it longer than anyone expected her to. Then she turned the page over. Written in uneven, blocky blue letters were 9 simple words. "He says he loves me, but I only feel safe when he's gone." A hush fell so deep it felt like the floor might swallow the room whole. The father stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "This is absurd," he barked. "That dog's trained. She could have—" "Sit down," Judge Brooks snapped, the softness in her voice gone. It cracked through the room like thunder. "Or I will have you removed." The father froze. Lily didn't flinch. Max didn't move. Judge Brooks lowered the drawing to the bench, her fingers lingering on its edge as if afraid that even air might tear it. And without raising her voice, she whispered, just loud enough for Lily to hear, "Thank you for telling us." The judge's gaze returned to Lily. She studied the girl's face with something more than legal focus. She looked as if trying to read invisible ink. Like the truth was there, in Lily's stillness, written between the lines of her silence. Then for the first time in a year and a half, Lily moved not just with her body, but with her voice. It came softly, barely louder than breath, but it cut through the air like a blade of light. "Max knows who keeps me safe," she said. The words didn't echo. They didn't echo. They carved. They stayed. They broke something open in everyone who heard them. Her voice was small, unpolished, but it existed. After 18 months of silence, Lily had spoken. She looked ahead, not at her father, not at her mother, not even at the judge, but straight forward, past everything and everyone. Max turned his head slightly as if to listen more closely, but he didn't lean in. He didn't need to. He had already heard her in all the ways that mattered. He remembers everything, Lily continued, her voice a touch steadier, even when I couldn't. The court reporter had stopped typing. The attorneys didn't move. Even Dr. Harper stood frozen in the gallery, her hand half lifted to her chest, as if trying to still her own heart. Across the room, Lily's mother broke into silent tears, not from shock, not even from joy, but from a deep, full heartbreak. Because hearing her daughter speak, after months of watching her fold inward, after countless nights of whispered lullabies met with silence, was both a miracle and a wound. It meant the pain had found a way out. It meant it had been there all along. Judge Brooks adjusted her glasses again, but this time not for clarity. Her eyes had welled, not dramatically, not enough to make her seem weak, but enough to remind everyone that beneath the robe was a person, a woman, maybe a mother. "Lily," she said, her voice rough around the edges. "Thank you." Those two words didn't sound procedural. They didn't belong to a transcript or a ruling. They were real, personal, a kind of reverence. Max, sensing something, leaned gently against Lily's leg. Just a small shift in weight, enough to ground her, to remind her he was still there. And Lily didn't look away. She didn't search for her mother's face. She didn't check to see if her father had heard. She didn't scan the room for approval or fear. She sat still, held by the weight of her own words, supported by the body of a dog who had become her anchor. It wasn't just testimony, it was truth. Undeniable, unfiltered, and completely hers. Judge Brooks took a slow breath and turned to Lily's mother. The woman was crying now, openly, but not uncontrollably. She didn't wipe the tears away. She didn't move to shush them. She let them fall because they weren't weakness. They were release. The lawyer beside her placed a steadying hand on her back, but she hardly noticed. Her eyes were locked on her daughter, full of sorrow and pride and awe. Because in her daughter's voice, she had heard every bruised night, every silent scream, every hug not asked for. And she had also heard something else. Hope. The judge straightened her back, cleared her throat, and turned to the court. "Effective immediately," she said with quiet authority, "full custody is granted to the child's mother." No one clapped, no one cheered, but the courtroom exhaled, as if it had been holding its breath for far too long, and finally, it could let go. The father shifted in his seat again, but the bailiff moved before he could rise. A single shake of the head was all it took. This wasn't his moment anymore. The gavel remained untouched. The ruling had already been made, but its weight still hung in the air. There was no need for emphasis. The words had already landed. The evidence had been drawn in crayon. The truth had been spoken, not with arguments or affidavits, but through a dog's bark and a child's whisper. And the world had listened. Judge Brooks turned her gaze from Lily to the mother, who sat weeping quietly, hands pressed against her lips, as though trying to contain everything that had risen to the surface: grief, relief, joy, regret. Her lawyer, composed but visibly moved, kept a hand gently at her back, offering what little stability could be offered after watching a child do what most adults never could. Then the judge looked toward the father. He had not stood again, not since being told to sit. His face had drained of all color, his posture rigid, like stone that had cracked but refused to fall apart. He didn't look at his daughter, not once, perhaps because he knew he couldn't meet her eyes without seeing his own reflection in them. The drawing still lay on the bench before Judge Brooks, its edges slightly curled. She reached forward and touched it lightly, not to pick it up, but to anchor herself in its quiet force. The crayon lines were uneven, the shapes rough, but the message had been clearer than any affidavit she'd ever read. More honest than any testimony. There, on that paper, lay a truth so unfiltered it had shifted the weight of the entire room. She looked back at Lily. "You've said more," the judge murmured, "with a single signal than most adults manage in 1,000 words." She wasn't speaking as a judge in that moment, not as an authority of law or power. She was speaking as a human being, one who had just witnessed something that broke through every layer of procedure, protocol, and practiced detachment. She paused, not to gather her thoughts, but to honor the moment. Then softly, deliberately, she set the gavel down flat on the bench. Not with force, but with reverence. A quiet surrender to something greater than justice. Truth spoken by a child brave enough to find her voice again. Then without a word, she rose from her seat. No formal adjournment, no dramatic exit. Just the slow, quiet act of leaving the bench as a woman who had been changed by what she had seen. No one in the courtroom moved. Even after she had gone, the room remained suspended, as if afraid that any motion might undo the stillness, might fracture the fragile sacredness that had passed through the space. Lily didn't move either. She reached down and opened her storybook slightly, just enough to tuck the corner of a page between her fingers. Max stayed at her side, close enough to touch but not demanding it. His ears twitched at the sound of footsteps fading down the hall, but his body leaned ever so gently into Lily's, a silent reassurance. "You are not alone," and she believed him. That moment stayed with her, quiet and powerful, like a promise made without words. 6 months later, the silence was different. It wasn't sharp or heavy anymore. It wasn't something to be feared. Now it was the kind of quiet that comes with peace, soft, warm, and full of space. The late afternoon sun stretched lazily across the town park in Vermont, painting everything in gold. Leaves fluttered overhead, casting dappled shadows onto the bench where Lily sat. Legs tucked beneath her, a sketch pad resting in her lap. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, holding a colored pencil with the kind of focus that made the world fall away. She wasn't drawing people. She drew trees, birds, open fields, and a dog, always the dog. Max lay curled beside the bench, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but alert in that quiet, watchful way of his. He didn't need to hover anymore. He didn't scan the world with urgency. His job for now was simply to be. Lily still didn't speak much, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't need to. She laughed sometimes now. She made eye contact. She had started sleeping through the night. Dr. Harper called it progress. Her mother called it a miracle. A gust of wind lifted the corner of Lily's sketch pad. She placed her hand on it gently, then looked up, drawn by a small voice nearby. A boy, maybe 5, with sticky fingers and an ice cream-stained shirt, had wandered over from the playground. He pointed at Max, eyes wide. "Can I pet your dog?" he asked. Lily paused, not in fear, not in retreat. Just a breath, a flicker of a girl who once disappeared inside silence. Then she set her pencil down, closed the sketch pad, and slowly tapped her chest. Once, twice. Max lifted his head, gave a single, soft bark. His tail wagged once. The boy giggled and stepped forward, grinning as Max leaned into his touch. Lily smiled, and then she laughed, a real laugh. Not polite, not careful, the kind that bubbles up from somewhere deep, catches in the chest and spills out like sunlight. Not just sound, but life. That laugh said, "I'm still here. I'm healing. And the bridge, it's holding." The boy ran back to the swings. Max curled back into the bench's shadow, and Lily picked up her pencil again. She didn't draw a courtroom. She didn't draw a house. She drew a field, with one small figure and one large dog walking side by side beneath an open sky. There were no walls, no cages, no corners to hide in, only light.